I want to give a big thank you to our friends and partners at Netflix. We're actually going to be doing a ton of work with them, and there will be many world premieres during the film festival, so big thanks to Netflix for making this happen with us. Please stay put after we show this first episode. We'll be back in about an hour to get into an in-depth conversation about this groundbreaking show and to really meet these incredibly exciting collaborators who have created this unique, thoughtful work of speculative fiction that just kind of continually surprises you and challenges us in terms of thoughts about sort of spirituality and community and all sorts of issues that really matter. And it's like I've been following them for many, many years. Their first film, The Sound of My Voice, I think is just one of the most wonderful independent films across the world. It's a real pleasure to have them with us. Please welcome the creators of the OA, Brit Marling and Zal Batmanglij.
When you make a movie and you have sort of, this is the second time we're ever screening it, we screened it last night in Los Angeles, and you have a screening, it's the first of many screenings. But this is different because this is the second and only screening on a big screen of this chapter. Okay. So in a way, you guys are having an experience together. We're going to have an experience together that's just unique to us, all of us here. Everyone else will have to watch it on their phones. So we get 5.1 sound, and we get, the historic Castro Theater. We'd like to thank Noah Cowan and the San Francisco Film Society. And I also wanted to take a moment to just say something about Brit Marling. I get to work with her every day, and it's the best part of the whole job. And what's crazy is we sit there and we write 400 pages, and then we separate. I go to start prepping with everybody else to direct it, but Brit has to do this thing that I can't even wrap my head around, which is that she has to embody this character that we've written, and she does it so wholly. And then on the other side of that, she comes in and she tears it up to the edit room, and she delivers this thing across the finish line. So I just want to say thank you, Brit.
Short and sweet. Emotional. I'm really happy that you guys are here tonight. We spent a lot of time researching in San Francisco, and then scouting in San Francisco, and then shooting in San Francisco. So in many ways,
San Francisco has long held the honor of being a noir city, but I think today more than ever, it's very apt,
That's amazing. Yes. A lot of ways to take that, but I think it's really more.
We also love this city, as I think you can tell by the way we photograph it.
Absolutely. I think we only just got a taste of what's to come, but it's wonderful to see some of the same themes in this one, and really themes that feel like they go back to the beginning of your collaboration, and particularly this idea of bringing together these kind of communities of outsiders. I'm starting to feel it gel in this movie, and of course so memorably with the group in part one of the OA. Tell me about your attraction to that and what we might be expecting to see in the community forming here.
That's a good question. I guess maybe it stems from the fact that Zal and I are outsiders, and we started making our work in a very outsider way. We came out to Los Angeles, and I wanted to be an actress, and then I found that all the parts for women were really abysmal and terribly written, and I couldn't figure out how to wade through that swamp in order to get to the good parts. It seemed like you'd lose something critical, some essential element of your soul by the time you got there. So we started writing, and then we initially went about trying to break into the system in the way that they tell you should. Write a screenplay, you try to save money, you try to attach somebody with a big name, and we couldn't find our way through any of that. And we're like, why are we doing this? Why aren't we just making films the way we made them in college, when we borrowed cameras and snuck into locations and got kicked out by security guards and then came back in and, bought a laptop so that we could use it for editing and then returned it 14 days later and then returned it 14 days later somewhere else. I think Apple just doesn't like hearing that story, but...
We have gotten to see some of this other things.
But I think that when we were making our first works together, especially Sound My Voice, it was made in an outsider way. We were just doing it with a group of friends outside the system because we loved storytelling and we wanted to get better at it. And that experience really impressed upon us how important having a collective or a tribe is to try to do something different.
Yeah, so maybe we're just writing about ourselves. The storytellers who are outsiders. I think that one of the things we realized in kind of storytelling, I think the things that Brit was feeling, especially as an actress, a young actress at that time, were things that weren't really talked about in the culture as much as they are today, for example. And I think when you look at something like, there are a lot of women who write comedy. That's something, since Lucy, if she was making fun of herself, Lucille Ball, it was okay. But writing, science fiction or drama, it's a much trickier space, and I think we really feel our outsider status. The stories that appeal to us don't necessarily appeal to everybody else.
Yeah, I wanted to get a little deeper into that too. There's been kind of this boom of science fiction, speculative fiction, kind of however you want to talk about it, and talk about it as speculative fiction with you guys, because there is this kind of you're not doing space opera at all. I mean, it's really talking about metaphysics and this idea of the tension between kind of faith and spirituality on one side and kind of doubt and self-doubt on the other, and it's really, really deep stuff. And I just wanted to sort of go into what attracts you to that? What attracts you to this kind of mode of fiction? Because you've really carved a very unique path in it over the films and now the show.
It's interesting. I'm reading this book called Time Travel. Have any of you guys heard about it? It's a book about the history of time travel, and it really starts with H.G. Wells. That's like the first place. And I didn't know that idea of time travel is a relatively new idea. Like Shakespeare didn't travel through time in his story. And so I think it came with the Industrial Revolution. In H.G. Wells' story, the time machine is basically a bicycle, when bicycles were becoming so popular and everything. And I think that this book traces the way that science fiction and speculative fiction mirrors what's happening in the society. And I think for us, the idea of multiple dimensions or a fractured dimension or a pretty like gonzo story or sort of like a maximalism or a genre slipstreaming matches the time that we live in. I mean, it feels like what's happening. And so it feels like the correct mode to be in. I don't know what you think.
No, I think that's really true. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I feel like I'm in a romantic comedy, and then I look at my phone and I'm in a horror film, and then you just slip streaming back and forth through these things, trying to make sense of reality. And the more time we spend on the internet, I think the harder it is to get a grasp on it.
I want to actually ask a little bit about your process. I always find co-creators like you two, it's a bit of a mystery. I'm kind of an enigma. It's always sort of different how you actually collaborate and work together. I was particularly interested in this case because Brit, you're also on screen. And so I just love to know, as you're starting to conceptualize your work, when does Brit's character come in? Is it something that you start with, or is she kind of woven into the thinking that you have and conceptualizing?
Well, can I share with you a small secret that I'm now going to share with a lot of you too?
1,000 people.
Zal is a very good actor. And so when we begin our storytelling, it actually starts with the two of us just performing back and forth for each other. Zal has played Hap and has played Homer and I have played Hap and Homer, and we sit in a room together and we just start acting stuff out. And the really good stuff sticks, and the really bad stuff just kind of falls away, but it always begins between the two of us as a kind of oral storytelling tradition. And only once it feels robust in that place do we start actually writing something down.
And then the other thing we like to do is to do trips together. So we came up here to San Francisco and spent 2 weeks going on walks with different people, going to different parts of town, trying to get to know it a little bit. And that was an amazing trip. People were very warm here and let us in and told us about what they were thinking about the city and feeling. And took a lot of those things back to our little writers from Los Angeles. Started dating them.
That's so fascinating because there's so much visual imagination in the work, and so when does that come to design? That idea of space and place and sort of how, because the one thing about the first season, and it looks like we're getting there here too with the design of the game, is that even the most kind of complex environments are truly believable. And so that authenticity of that sort of the visual space that you create, how do you come up with that? How do you do that?
I think part of that is in the writing, in the sense that I think it's interesting when you can try to take high concept ideas and then like ground them in something as mundane as the parent-teacher conference. Like I love the idea that in chapter 1 of part 1, we're like there at a public school and it's desaturated and it's sad and it's a concrete space and we're just showing up to meet a teacher that, and I think Zal and I have always been interested in being able to straddle between that space, the parent-teacher conference, and then all the way to the near-death experience and cartoons, whatever, star room, whatever you want to call it, and to us, I think it's about trying to figure out how you can tell a story that touches on both of those things and then bring some of the magical back into the mundane. And I don't know if that's just because that's how life feels to us, or I don't know, it's all...
Pretty great answer. Brit, I want to just throw this one at you, because Zal referenced it in the intro, but so you're in this sort of like conceptual space, although it makes a little bit more sense the way that you sort of talked about starting things in a kind of a performative way. But is there a big flip that has to happen for you after, so okay, the script feels done, at least in the place it's going to be for now. Now we're going to start shooting, it's going to be the intensity of production. Do you have to become someone different? Do you actually sort of, is there a moment where you kind of go like, okay, this Brit's done, this Brit's coming?
Yes, and it's the worst. It's the worst because it's so lonely. We spend all this time together, it's so intimate, coming up with a story, wrestling it into the script, and then at some point we sort of have to part ways for a moment, and I have to really go prepare as an actor, and he has to prepare as a director, and they're very different zones, and it's very hard to get into.
Can you talk a little bit about the body stuff, just Nina's body?
Yeah, I guess the part of acting that I find the most difficult is how vulnerable you are. And I think it's because when I'm writing, it's from up here. You're imagining it and you try to embody it as you're writing, but mostly you're up here. And then as a performer, suddenly it's all visceral. So usually when I try to get out of writer, creator mode and back into actor mode, it's like, what is the physical thing I can hold on to? To get really granular, Nina Azarova, the body that OA jumps into, is not a nail biter, but I've been biting my nails for 35 years. And I tried everything to stop. Like my mom used to put that terrible, tacky, poisonous stuff on my fingers to get me. That was probably really bad for me. To get me to try not to eat, I'd bite right through the poison anyway. And so to try to stop finally, it was really hard, but it was the beginning of now I'm creating a new body or a new vessel that is going to be the space that this character, Nina Azarova, is going to come into. And Nina Azarova speaks Russian, and she spent the last 10 years in San Francisco, and so you try to find a physical way, the voice, the hands, what you're wearing, to trick yourself out of analytical mode and to get back into something that's closer to dance, really, or to athleticism. I think acting is a kind of weird emotional athletics. It's it's all in here, I think they're really great actors when you're watching them. They've left this space and it's just intuitive. And I struggle with that. It's hard for me. That's why I like it so much. It's a real challenge to drop into the body.
And Zal, what's your role in this? Because you have this like writing partner, this huge creative partner, who's suddenly now someone sort of on the other side, so to speak.
Well, I mean, it's an amazing thing to watch. Like, I remember when we did the first camera test, which is like maybe 10 weeks after we finished writing, and Nina Azarova steps on, in front of the camera, and you feel the difference in Brit. And she lasts like that for about 5 months. So, you feel the difference. But I guess the other thing is, I guess I'm just an idiot or kind of autistic or something, because it took me, Brit and I were just hanging out in post a couple months ago, and I was like, I would do all this stuff, and then I would be in it, and I guess that's what I was trying to say in the intro, because I never actually thought about actually having to act. Like, when you direct, even if you're having a shit day, you can like sit in a chair, or people can prop you up, and like an actor has none of those. They have to be on, and they have to be correct emotionally, and they have to do all those things, and I just don't know how she does it. It's kind of crazy. So I guess I'm trying to say that my job's pretty easy.
Directing 5 hours.
It's an incredible partnership, and in terms of what's coming, I wanted you guys to talk a little bit about what's coming up in the rest of the season. One of the things that I found out is, which is amazing to me because you guys have such a tight creative partnership, is that you've actually let a couple of other incredible creative people into the process as well. Two of my absolute favorite directors, Anna Rose Ulmer, who made The Fifths, which was in the San Francisco Film Festival a couple years ago, incredible film, and Andrew Hay, of course, we know very well because of Looking, also incredible director. How was it letting in, these are pretty serious sort of creative individuals with a lot of thoughts and stuff like that into your creative universe?
Well, I think we would have been like novelists, co-novelists, if we did want to let other creative. We've been letting in heavy hitters from the beginning, whether it's Lowell Crawley, who shot part 1, or Stephen Meisler, who shot part 2, or our production designers, Alex DiGirolando, from part 1, and John Goldsmith, who did a great job in part 2. So it was a very Anna Rose Ulmer and Andrew Hay are pretty amazing people. So it was very natural. And the beauty of it is they'd seen part 1 and had, it resonated for them. So it was very natural.
Is it different for you?
No, I guess what you're looking, I think what Zal said is true. I think if we were interested in the idea of the solitary artist, which I always kind of, something about the myth of the single artist as genius kind of thing that I always find funny or strange, or just not appealing for me. I'm interested in what a collective can create. And so whenever you find someone else that's like-minded, whether that's a director or an actor or someone who does costume design, you're just like, oh great, you're here, come. We're putting on this play right now upstairs. We're trying to figure out the second part of the third act, and you just want to invite people in and
I guess because we collaborate together, so it feels very natural to let other people in. Like that's never, I don't think, been a problem. But you have to ask them, and maybe we're actually.
maybe they have a terrible time.
Both incredibly nice people, so they say nice things. I'm going to turn over the audience, I think, now, just as we're sort of getting mics set up and stuff like that. I think we have mics right. So as we start to find people, I'm just going to ask you just maybe for one quick thought from each of you about what's to come in season 2. One thing that people might want to look out for.
I just like the idea of thinking of part 2 as a metaphysical film noir. I think, as I was saying earlier, the definition of noir is a gangster movie without gangsters. That those things usually have nihilist endings, and I don't think this one does. So I'm curious to see how that plays.
Yeah, this has a doozy of an ending.
I got a knack for that, you guys. Beginning of part 1 is, kind of a bit of a mind bender and an incredible thing to leave you feeling, thinking for some time. All right, who we got? Great, thank you.
Hello. Hi, my name is Gabriel. I actually asked a question at the Q&A for season 1 about bravery. I don't know if you remember that. Because you guys' lead on paper is so honest and so truthful. And I wanted to ask the same question again, if in terms of theme, what it was and how it changed, and what your inspiration for the difference in theme was this season. But I also wanted to apologize to Zal, because the first time I saw you was that Q&A where I asked you about bravery. And the second time was the Ingrid Goes West Q&A, and I ran into you outside the theater. And I was a complete coward because of this. Anyways, and I drove here from LA to redeem myself, just to say that. So thank you.
You've been redeemed! Thank you for coming.
I think there's a question about
It's a good question about theme, too, I guess. Like, how is the theme different this go around? And I think one of the things that's in part one, but maybe not as focused on, is the idea of the interplay between the intelligence we accept in technology and the intelligence of nature in the natural world. And I think San Francisco is an amazing place to explore that because it's obviously the epicenter of tech, but also there are all these incredible green spaces and natural world that has been protected. And so part two does dive into that. So.
Without any spoilers.
Without any spoilers.
Yep. Got a couple up there, Leanne. We got one more. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Flora.
Hi, Flora.
Somehow I get a chance to tell you correctly.
Could you speak up just a little?
Oh, yes, my name is Flora, and I'm so glad that I get a chance to tell you directly how wonderful this show is. I just met some people tonight, we were standing in line, and it's just really neat to meet people who have the same appreciation. Brit, you once said in an interview, you were talking about how the show's very elliptical, and I was just kind of like overblown because I kept having this thought that the show's very elliptical, and there's all these little moments where I feel like I could be watching the same thing, but it's a completely different scene. It's a completely different character maybe, but I still feel like the circular thing. And I was wondering if you could just elaborate without, giving us the whole story or anything away. But the elliptical.
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. I think Zal and I think about that a lot. One of the things we really wrestle with is the hero's journey as an idea or a backbone for storytelling is in everything. And it's such a linear journey. We meet the protagonist, he's presented with a call to adventure, he rejects it, nope, then he accepts it. Rising conflict, mounting, single climax of day one. That sort of line is how we're all used to consuming narrative. And that's interesting, but I think also we've become fascinated with the idea of trying to unpack what it might be like to trace an area over again and again and slowly get to a center, kind of like when you open a Russian doll and there's another inside and another inside, and you're trying to get to the nadir or something. And we're really interested in that structurally, and so we're trying it out. You let us know if it works or not.
Yeah, I think the rhymes just also happen innately because we have sort of a creative vocabulary with each other, and you just see those things. A lot of them we're not conscious of. Great. Yeah, that's it.
Hi. Thank you so much for the show. It means so much to me. It's a revelation. Thank you. My question is the relationship between prairie and hack. Sort of that there wouldn't be the angel if there wasn't the devil kind of dynamic, and how that almost are basically creating this transcendent experience together, where they're able to. I guess I just want you to speak a little bit more on sort of that dynamic.
But I think one of the things we've thought about a lot with Hack is the idea of a character that is just so obsessed with the ends that he slowly, incrementally blurs the means. He wasn't Hack when as we know him, when he was 18. Like, what was 18-year-old Hack like? And what was the first sort of small moral compromise he made in pursuit of his capital T truth that was so important to him? And then what was the next moral compromise? And then the next one, and then we meet him, and where is he? And how does meeting Prairie impact him? And I think we're very much still inside that journey, but when we write characters, we try, I think you have to write them properly. You try not to judge them. You try to come at it wholeheartedly, like this person thinks and feels this way. And so in the moment that you're writing the scene from his perspective, you have to think and feel it too. And so Zal and I spend a lot of time inhabiting all of these, and I know what you mean by the sort of duality between the two of them, but I think hopefully we can move away from that binary and see that a bit of the light is in Hap, a bit of the shadows in OA, and they kind of, that's why they're kind of doing this dance around each other maybe. It's a really interesting question.
Yeah, check out chapter 7 of part 2 on Friday.
I think it's a really good question. Also, I mean, one of the really fascinating things in part 1 was that you were setting this character up as being this absolute evil, and then, well into the series, you actually introduce a more evil character who's his mentor. And so it sort of does go against this sort of binary idea. Will we see a bit of that in season 2 as well? Is that...
Just try not to spoil things.
I was wondering what he was going to say.
I'll take that as a yes. All right, next question.
Right here, back center.
Yeah.
Hey guys, my name's Taylor.
Hi.
Thank you guys for having us. This is a really great experience. Wanted to ask you guys about your experience working with Rostam on the soundtrack and how that conversation sort of got started with him.
Rostam, you probably know, is my brother, if you didn't know. So I'm not allowed to work with him because he doesn't want to work for me. And so he only works with Brit. And Brit, you should answer the question.
Well, we discovered this in part 1, that, it's not fun if you're a younger sibling to have your older brother be formally your boss. It's complicated. So,
But no, it's really amazing. Rostam is, every once in a while in telling the story, I think we have met people without whom we literally could not have told the story. And when you think about it like that, you realize how high up you are on a tight rope wire, and that there's no safety net. And that if you don't encounter those singular people who can help you get the story across the finish line, it would not work. And Rostam is one of those people. When he wrote that theme for part 1, he wrote it before we even got on set. And we used to, when we were leaving set, to drive home exhausted at like 4 in the morning after we'd been shooting for days in Queens on a soundstage inside Hap's basement. It was a very intense place, but we would put that Rostam's theme on in the car, and we'd drive home with all the windows down and the air coming in, and we were like, this is the sound of what we're making. Like, this is what the feeling we're trying to get to.
And then, us being the way that we are, we weren't satisfied with just reusing that this year. We said, Rostam, actually, can you do a noirish San Francisco Russian theme for us? And we're going to do it over NASA space footage. And he was like, sure.
he actually did it.
Yeah, I kind of like it even better.
Cool, I think it's time maybe for one more.
You're to the left, to your right.
Hi, where did you come up with that dance, and will we see it again in season 2?
We like to call it a dance. We like to call it movements. Ryan Heffington came up with them. He's an amazing choreographer. I guess decade, almost 2 decades ago, when Brit and I were in college, we talked about the idea of what if there were a series of movements that could open a portal to another dimension. Something we've been talking about together for years. And then I remember I had a boyfriend when I was 25, and he was like a little older and wiser, and he took me to my first dance recital. I guess it was one that was choreographed by Ryan Heffington. And I was kind of blown away by that experience. And then I think a year later, I saw Ryan Heffington at the Act Bar in Silver Lake, and I came up to him and I was like, so I'm going to make this thing one day, and it's going to be this interdimensional dancing thing, and I really want you to do them. And he was like, yeah, kid, that's great. Yeah, let's do it. And I guess Brit and I came up to him like 10 years later. And
10 years later, and we were like, no big deal. We've just spent the last 3 years trying to dig out this story, and the entire thing is based on these series of movements that open a portal into another dimension. No pressure, it can be choreographed his credit, we gave him a couple ideas or guidelines, and then he went away and he was like, okay, I think I've got something. He brought us into the sweat spot in Silver Lake, and all the lights were dimmed low, and he had two dancers he works with a lot, Tina and another Ryan, and they were wearing black, and they were in that space, and he had put on the sound of Saturn's rings, because we told him we were listening to that a lot writing, and the two dancers just did all 5 movements, and it just changed the air in the room. Like, I don't know what it was. Some of the people we were with just started spontaneously crying. Some of us were like, there was a variety of reactions, but it touched everybody in a visceral place.
Yeah, they made me really uncomfortable. Like, and I think that's the best part. Like, it's like anything. I think over time, those movements can just if we don't give up and we keep going, if we're lucky, if you guys watch it and tell your friends to watch it, and we keep going, those movements will normalize. I really do.
Or they're normalized, but
We'll start seeing them trickle down.
But I think they'll still open a portal to another dimension.
I will say this though, this is the last thing, and the show is going to go live at midnight tomorrow. I will tell you guys a spoiler. The movements will show up, but they will maybe show up in a different form.
Oh, okay.
Well, thank you both for opening another portal for us. Zal Batmanglij, Brit Marling, thank you.
after a while, once you start to think about it, it really doesn't, it doesn't fall.